Welcome to Sarder TV, an idea sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, who's an author, investor, and the CEO of Netcom Learning and AI Certs. We're thrilled to have Jim Keys join us today. Jim is the former CEO of Blockbuster and 7-Eleven, and he's also the author of the book called Education is Freedom. He's here to tell us more about his book and lessons learned during his time as CEO. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be with you. Look forward to the discussion.
Me too. So to begin with, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I started flipping burgers at McDonald's, and then I won the lottery, and here I am. And I wish it was that easy. Wouldn't it be fun if it was just that easy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish it was.
Yeah. No, I have had a very interesting journey. I've had the privilege of leading two Fortune 500 companies, Blockbuster and 7-Eleven. And I attribute all of that good luck, if you will, to a combination of some pretty hard work along the way, but mostly education. I have mastered the code of learning how to learn, and I believe that fueled the opportunity. It was really the key to opportunity, whether it was from the time I was in high school or grade school, through college, through graduate school, and then ultimately in my career. I came to realize that my degree was just a license to learn, and that if I kept learning, I would keep opening doors and advancing both my career and the company's success related to not only my learning, but sharing that learning.
Yeah. And certainly your journey has taught you so much about leadership and business strategy. So as former CEO of 7-Eleven and Blockbuster, how did your leadership approach differ between the two companies, especially given their contrasting industries and the stages of their evolution while you were leading them?
Yeah, it's interesting you should ask. I'm actually working on a chart that tries to describe my unique perspective on leadership, and I think it's a bit unique because we've all read the leadership books. You've got leadership by walking around, servant leadership, leadership this, leadership that, blah, blah, blah. And what I've done in this chart, if you can imagine, is put all of those forms and approaches to leadership from all of the business gurus that have ever opined about the importance of, one style of leadership versus another. And in the heart of my chart is the word change, because I have, in the book I just released, coined the expression change equals opportunity, with the idea being that all of commerce begins and ends with change. Something happens, somebody responds to it, and they're compensated. And then something else happens. Now, maybe a competitor coming in, it may be a macro environmental change, and the company has to respond to that change. And it's the role of the CEO. It's no accident that change equals opportunity is also the acronym for CEO, because leadership is about change. It's not about learning one style of leadership and then sticking to it, whatever happens. And so on this imaginary chart, if you will, you've got all these various forms of leadership. And what a good leader knows is that depending on the circumstances, they may have to draw from any of those possible forms of leadership to meet the needs of that circumstance caused by that change.
Sure. So when it comes to your particular leadership style and leading companies through periods of growth, but also leading them through challenges and sort of turbulent times, how would you then apply one of these leadership principles around change?
Well, I'll give you three elements, and there, again, sometimes in some circumstances you have to have compassion and build a team and let it be more of a democratic approach, and then at other times it has to be more of an autocratic. This is what we have to do. Follow me. We got no time to mess with this. We're going. Come on, and those circumstances, those styles will be dictated by the urgency of the change that occurs. It could be a change that requires immediate action, no time for consultation and groupthink. We've got to take action. It could be, the change is less immediate but coming, and we need some consensus built around how best to respond. So in order to be able to adapt to change, I have a set of rules, if you will, or guidelines, roadmap maybe, of three basic things that I've tried to keep relatively simple. One is to embrace the change, so that this would be my entire team understanding that the change itself is irrelevant. Change is the only thing that's inevitable. Our response to that change is something we can control. So how do we choose to respond proactively in a positive fashion rather than reactively and causing perhaps a less than desirable outcome? So embracing change is the first. Well, then the second piece of the puzzle is, even if you recognize change is coming, even if you want to embrace it, many, many leaders and many people on the team may suffer from the lack of confidence in being able to get through this change. It could be imagine a terrible storm and you're in a boat. If the sailor at the helm is not confident, you're going to roll over. You may perish in the storm. But that confidence is required to chart a steady course that will keep you safe to the bright side of that storm, to get through the storm to the other side. And then the third, even if you have the ability to embrace change and the ability to have confidence, then clarity is critically important. Because if you're not listening to each other, if you're formulating your answer before you've even heard the other person's point of view, so inbound communications or clarity, and then outbound clarity, simplification of the strategy, if you will, of the request of the team. If they don't understand your direction, if they don't understand your strategy, then they can't help you execute that plan successfully. So I point to those three things: embracing change, having confidence, and having clarity to be able to then choose whatever the appropriate leadership requirements are to navigate that any given crisis.
Yeah. And hopefully they choose the right one.
Yeah, hopefully.
So when it comes to strategy, you led 7-Eleven through its transformation. You steered Blockbuster during turbulent times in the entertainment industry. What's the most important factor in successfully turning around a struggling company, or some of the most important factors?
Yeah, I think again, it's managing those three things: that ability to deal with change, having confidence to do something about it, and the clarity that's required. Because ironically, people don't often see the similarities between Blockbuster and 7-Eleven. They think, well, it's two entirely different businesses. Not at all. First of all, they were both about convenience. 7-Eleven started in 1927 as an ice house. And then somebody invented something called a refrigerator. And it put their business model in jeopardy. But they recognized all the way back to about 1930 that their business wasn't providing ice. It was providing convenience, because where else were people going to get ice for their old-fashioned ice box? So they adapted their business model to satisfy convenience needs and never looked back. The convenience industry was born. Well, Blockbuster was very similar in a way. It wasn't about renting DVDs. It was convenient access to media entertainment. I don't care how I get it: VHS tapes, DVD, streaming. So our challenge was to adapt to that change. Now, what happened to both Blockbuster and 7-Eleven is in the middle of this transformation, both companies experienced a massive macro environmental financial catastrophe. In the case of 7-Eleven, it was Black Monday that occurred in 1987, and 7-Eleven was put back on its heels and almost went out of business by 1991 as a result. In Blockbuster's case, it was the same thing. And having lived through both of those, I'm like a sailor that, has these beautiful boats, and all of a sudden it's like, why do I have to get the like world-class, hurricanes that I have to sail through, Because it happened to Blockbuster in 2007. We had the global financial market collapse. 2008, and Blockbuster had $1 billion of debt and an inability to get that debt refinanced. So both companies, I was able to experience business transformation, but also business rescue, if you will, caused by a macro environmental change that required an entirely different strategy, an entirely different form of leadership.
Yeah, yep. And, Blockbuster also faced sort of this stiff competition, right, from Netflix and these other emerging technologies. So in hindsight, what strategic opportunities could Blockbuster have leveraged differently, do you think, to stay competitive in a new digital landscape?
Not the ones you would think. You might think, well, we should have embraced technology. Well, ironically, we did. We had superior technology to Netflix when it came to streaming. First thing I did when arriving at the company in 2007 was to acquire a streaming video company that had been built by 5 of the 6 major studios. So they had already digitized 3,000 of the best-selling new release titles, which, by the way, was 80% of the demand for Blockbuster, the new movies. Mm-hmm. Netflix, meanwhile, was still doing DVDs by mail and was just building a capability to have streaming, but they had no content yet, no serious content yet. Certainly no new movies at all. So the perception is that Blockbuster didn't keep up with technology. The reality is that Blockbuster had a competitive advantage on streaming, but the financial markets collapse caused it to have to put those plans aside for a period of time and focus on refinancing the balance sheet. And very few people understand that really is what caused Blockbuster to have to take a pause and allowed Netflix the opportunity to move ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if people are really aware of that. So that's interesting. And is that a result of what was going on in 2008?
Direct result of 2008. Blockbuster had $1 billion of debt, of which a third was due to be repaid in 2009 or refinanced. Lehman Brothers collapsed in September of 2008. So here Blockbuster was. They had now a plan called Total Access. So while Netflix was doing DVDs by mail and a little testing of streaming, Blockbuster had DVDs by mail, in-store, kiosks, and a digital streaming service with new releases. So very strong competitive offer compared to Netflix, like night and day. But Netflix had no debt. We had $1 billion. The financial markets collapsed, and that caused us to have to pause.
Yeah. Well, 7-Eleven also saw tremendous growth under your leadership, especially internationally. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges when expanding from, domestic brand into global markets?
Well, ironically, 7-Eleven again had that same problem going back. I mentioned to 1987, and by 1991, 7-Eleven was in bankruptcy. 7-Eleven had to have a financial restructuring. Now, the opportunity for 7-Eleven was a little bit different from Blockbuster, in that we were able to refinance the company in a 7-Eleven, Chapter 11 restructuring, with the support of one of our largest licensees, 7-Eleven Japan. Came in and helped us get this restructuring done. And that allowed 7-Eleven, it's sometimes, it requires hitting the wall. It requires a catastrophic event for a company to reinvent itself. It's almost, a natural, what's it called? Natural destruction of, when a forest fire burns of an entire forest, it will regrow in a healthier way in many cases, because it had to sort of purge its, 100 years of overgrowth, perhaps, to then regrow in a new way. Companies go through the same life cycle sometimes, and they get stuck. They get bureaucratic, they have inertia, they stop growing. And 7-Eleven was in that mode. And so in many ways, the bankruptcy of 7-Eleven allowed a rebirth of the company. It allowed us to stop doing the things that had made us successful in the past, rethink our business model, use technology in the case of 7-Eleven. And to your question, what helped us propel 7-Eleven? It was the use of technology that allowed us to truly transform the way we looked at the convenience industry, and then share that model with licensees all over the world, and let them also use technology to put 7-Eleven head and shoulders above any other convenience retailer.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And, both 7-Eleven and Blockbusters, again, are well-established legacy brands, and you did a lot to drive innovation and change. How did you do this while it's still respecting the history of the brands and the customer base?
The idea of innovation, many times, in fact, the bigger the company is, there's a tendency to think that innovation is somebody else's job. We have to hire a company to come in and innovate for us, a creative company, or we have to delegate innovation to our suppliers. Coke should develop the next new soft drink, et cetera. But the irony is, we're the ones closest to the customer as a retailer. They tell us what they want every day. And so what I tried to foster within 7-Eleven was a culture of innovation. I tried to have a team that, if we're going to bring a new convenience item to the table, I wanted them to discover it before I did. And it became almost a game that I would search all over the world for the next new thing. And when I would find the next new thing, I would bring it back, and hopefully my team had already discovered it and they were working on it already. In some cases, no. In some cases, they said, oh my gosh, he found something first, so we'll now work on it and we'll develop it and put it in market. But it was constantly about adaptation, change, innovation, because that's what keeps a company healthy and allows it to thrive versus competition.
Yeah. So when you think about, your tenure as CEO of these companies, what would you say were some of the most difficult decisions you had to make as CEO, and how did you handle those?
There are many of the decisions are tough. When you run into an external financial crisis, the hardest thing to do is now you have to cut expenses. It's just a fiscal reality of the environment. At 7-Eleven, we had a lot of debt. A lot of things had to go. At the time, we had corporate jets. We had all of these, perks of the job that people got comfortable with. They had to go. The headquarters. We even sold our headquarters. Too fancy. We didn't need a big fancy office building. So these were hard decisions to make, because sometimes they affect people's lives, and it's hard for you to have to make these decisions that are going to affect so many people. But you also have the entire stakeholder group in mind. And so in the interest of the enterprise, sometimes you have to make decisions that will affect the individual. And that's always a difficult decision. Those decisions were difficult. Probably the even greater decisions that were, I don't want to say hard, but that were troubling, is that CEOs sometimes get in a position where they are offered a solution that's not in the best interest of the enterprise, but it might be in the best interest of them personally. Or it may be in that gray area that we're not sure if this is legal, but it's probably okay. Well, for me, those were easy decisions because I never felt that I had to operate in the gray. I would always stay in the black or the white, preferably on the right side of regulations and laws. But there were always times when you were presented. I was CFO during the time of Enron. And the same people that were pitching Enron on these offshore tax shelter opportunities, special purpose entity schemes, basically to save money, save taxes, were presenting those to me as a CFO of a public company, and I was turning them down. Hard decision. My threshold was, if I can't understand it well enough to explain it to my board, I have no business accepting it. And yet their argument was, you're not supposed to understand it. We're the financial experts. We've come up with these schemes that will work. Trust us. Those are hard decision points when you're in a position of leadership, but that's where your values, your critical thinking skills really come into play.
Yeah. So how did you stay resilient as a leader during these intense changes and, times of real pressure?
I like to think that I was able to find a balance. And this sounds a little bit crazy, but if you think about the difference between pure reason and faith, all right? You've got this continuum of one extreme is pure reason. It's all about the money, right? And then the other is pure faith. It's all about, I don't know what, I'm just going to trust that it'll all come out okay, right? Well, there's a balance in between, and I like to describe it. In fact, I think it was Pope John Paul that wrote this piece about the balance between faith and reason, which was I found pretty interesting for someone of such profound spirituality. Recognized that there was a balance, and that he compared it to a bird that required two wings. Too much faith and you become fundamentalist and you block out reason. Too much reason and you become all about the money and all about the outcome, and you forget that there are other people involved. And he described it as a balance between faith and reason that allows a human to soar. And I think that trying to keep that balance, recognizing that this wasn't personal, that when you have to make these hard decisions, you get arrows and shots fired from all directions, whatever way you go, if you lean too much toward either direction. And that since it's not personal, you make your best decision based on the best information you have, and you have the faith to know that with confidence you're doing the right thing and it's not personal. That, I think, is what kept me sane throughout those challenging times.
Yes, yeah. And that's great that you had such you had the vision to see it in those perspectives, right? And really sort of keep balance when you were probably facing tough times.
Thank you. You just said the magic word. You know what it is?
Yes.
It's perspective. This is on the cover. This idea of perspective is on the cover of my book on purpose, because I've been blessed with some amazing friendships in my life, and some of my dearest friends are astronauts. Just happens to be, I was a wannabe astronaut, right? Every astronaut that leaves this planet has that overview perspective of the earth. And when they see it, and I get the privilege of seeing this, I'm a pilot, I can fly up to 45,000 feet. And at 45,000 feet, you just begin to see the curvature of the earth. And looking down on the earth from that perspective, you don't see borders, you don't see race, you don't see wars. It truly gives you a different sense of perspective, as opposed to teleporting yourself back to the sea level and the perceptions that we feel here based on a very limited view of the earth. And I believe strongly that that difference between perception that triggers fear and sometimes anger, versus perspective, which allows us to step back and take a deep breath and a different look at the problem, that difference between perception and perspective is where knowledge and faith come into play.
Mm. Do you ever wish you could just stay there?
Yeah. Oh, all the time. Yeah.
So
I do.
take me with
I'd
you
love
next
to be
time.
Yeah. I'd love to be on the space station.
Oh my gosh. Well, it sounds like you maybe almost might have been. You wanted to be
Yeah, you never know. Hey, it's not too late. It's not too late.
Not too late. I know. And you just held up your book,
I
Education is
did.
Freedom, The Future is in Your Hands, which you wrote. So tell us what the book is about and what inspired you to write the book.
Well, the idea that education is freedom was actually inspired. I was walking across campus at Columbia University going back. I had gone to graduate school there, and I was walking across campus to go teach a class. And I saw a kid walking toward me, and he looked like hell. He looked just like I had been when I was there, in t-shirt and tired, and I'm full of books. But his t-shirt said those three words: education is freedom. And it stopped me in my tracks. And there were literally three takeaways from that. The first being, wow, I owe everything I have achieved to education. I wouldn't even be here. I'd be in a factory somewhere like my dad had worked many, many years. But education was the path for me to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. So that was the first learning. The second was, wait a minute, my education is not done. My degree is a license to learn. I've got to keep learning because that's how I got here. But for me to be successful in business, I have to keep learning. So that was also an epiphany of that moment. And then the third was, wait a minute, it's when I was here in graduate school of business, I thought it was all about money. And up until this stage in my career, I still thought it was about how much do I earn, what am, et cetera, et cetera. And I realized, it's those three simple words made me realize it's not about money at all. It's about having the freedom to do whatever I want to do with whomever I wish to do it. And money's an enabler, yeah, but it's not the goal. The goal is to have freedom in your life, individually and collectively. And so I filed that away. I said, wow, man, I went into the class and I shared those perspectives with those kids in the class. And I said, man, I just had a huge learning. And then after going back to my normal life, at one point we decided we had a supply and demand problem on the people side of the business. And we said, let's create a foundation where we can go into public schools and grow our own. I met with the ad agency and they said, well, what was your inspiration for creating a foundation that would help young people succeed? And I shared the story of this t-shirt. And I said, those three words, education is freedom, really changed my life. And I want to share that with young people. And we created a foundation 20 years ago by the name Education is Freedom.
Wow. So well, number one, what are some of the biggest takeaways that you want readers to have once they've finished reading your book, Education is Freedom?
Well, the biggest takeaway is probably the subtitle of the book, which says the future is in your hands. I mean that literally and figuratively, because today in your hands is a phone that's a portal to unlimited learning. Now, contrast that to what I had growing up, which is a set of encyclopedias borrowed from, a neighbor or ones my mom brought home from the grocery store. Literally. And so there is no excuse today for anyone to not have access to unlimited learning through technology. Now, you may not have access to the best schools, whatever, but that becomes available the more you learn. And so the power is in your hands to learn. The power is also in your hands to manage your reaction to crisis or change. So my takeaway from the book, what I hope people take away is I individually am in control of my own response to change, and I am in control of my own ability to learn. So therefore, there's really no excuse. I can be whoever and whatever I choose to be, but it's my choice. And that's what freedom's all about.
That's great. And you also mentioned you have the foundation that's called Education is Freedom. It's been around for 20 years. Tell us what you've achieved so far.
It's pretty remarkable when you look back and see what's possible. We've had over 500,000 young people come through the program, have changed many, many lives. Many of those 500,000 people, first generation students, to be able to go to college, to find a better life. I have so many examples of, I've got a young man who went to Georgetown University. He came from a tough side of town, was not going to go to college. Ended up at Georgetown, got a degree there, went on to Harvard and Columbia, got 2 master's degrees, came back to his hometown to teach in public school system, ended up working. He was a White House fellow working for the Department of Education most recently. I have hundreds of stories like that of lives that have been changed through the power of learning.
Yeah, must feel so rewarding to be on this journey. Yeah,
it's fun. But most recently, what's been exciting is launching this book. Now has taken that basic idea that we were employing here in the United States, and the book has given me a global audience for it. So right now, as of just 2 days ago, we wrapped up a promotion that was running all summer long, where any student anywhere in the world that would read the book and post a video telling us what education meant to them, what they saw as education is freedom, they had a chance to win one of $10,000 scholarships. I now am sitting on videos from hundreds of young people from every continent on the globe.
Wow.
Countries like Rwanda, Nigeria, China, Australia, everywhere.
Wow.
And they're pouring their hearts into these videos with such really creative ways of telling their peers, because they're out on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, they're telling their peers, here's why education is really important. And if I shared these videos with you, I promise you I could make you cry.
Oh.
No, it's a beautiful thing, because these are just such sincere young people talking about how they want to succeed, and they know the power of learning is their path to success.
Yeah, that's amazing. What's the criteria for winning the prize?
Put together a video and be creative and come up with your best explanation for why education is freedom. So I'm learning from these videos. I've got one young lady, I think she was Portuguese. I'm not sure. Or maybe from Brazil, speaking Portuguese, but she put together a sort of a series of, I think, 15 people that said education is freedom in 15 different languages.
Oh,
And she filmed them, put together this montage of all of these young people saying education is freedom in their own native tongue. It's just
very
really
creative.
creative things. Yeah.
Yeah.
The young man from India did a whole animation.
Wow.
Mhm.
Really? Did you even think it would spur that when you put that out as a?
It did. I thought it would get some pretty interesting results because I was able to partner with Mr. Beast and Beast Philanthropy. And he has an audience, Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast, has an audience of 260 million young people. So I knew that if we partnered with him and put something out there, that I'd probably get some pretty good response. But boy, I got to tell you, to see these videos coming in from all over the world is a pretty moving experience to know that you're having that kind of an impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Jim, I want to turn to AI now, ask you a few questions about AI and get your leadership perspective on, as someone who's been involved in the tech space, what opportunities do you think AI offers to enhance decision making,
Yeah.
especially at the executive level?
I'm going to share something that is probably not top of mind in the use of AI. In fact, I haven't heard very many people talking about this. But to me, the biggest single opportunity for AI is to change the way we learn. And see, it's machine learning, and machine learning means that the computer keeps learning faster and faster and faster. Well, why does it do that? Because it keeps building on its own knowledge, right? And it learns at an incredibly increasing pace. Well, human learning is sometimes slow and sometimes not as effective because we tend to teach in standardized ways. So some people learn better with video, some people learn better with written words, some people learn better through experiences, etc. Well, AI will let us curate the way a lesson is delivered based on the way a person is actually responding to it through a repeated series of testing, teaching, testing, teaching, testing. Well, that is basically machine learning to accelerate human learning, right? So, and I mean, some people, let's face it, if you were dyslexic or if you had ADHD at one point, you were kind of pushed to the edges of the standardized bell curve, where today you could be right there at the top of the bell curve because you're going to be learning at a pace potentially as fast as someone without that, perhaps what was perceived as a disability in the past. So you apply that in the corporate world and you think about how AI can help us as leaders learn better, learn more effectively, then if learning is directly correlated to success as a leader and success at solving business problems, then we're going to be better leaders, better managers because of AI and the ability to have the tool help us learn faster.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I say perspective a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep saying it. That's the main theme of my book. You've got to have perspective.
So then, what do you think CEOs, or how should CEOs then approach integrating AI into their business strategies then?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of too often I think companies will embrace the technology for the sake of the technology rather than understand what they're trying to accomplish. What is the objective? So a gee whiz new technology will sometimes be forced into the system, and then we don't know how to monetize it. We don't really know what it does to the business. So my recommendation is to step back and better understand what are you trying to accomplish, and how does the technology help us accomplish that, rather than technology for the sake of technology.
So what skills do you think are needed to build this, this capability around AI for leaders and then for employees as well?
Yeah, here's where I differ from most. Many people are saying now we need specialists. We need coders. We need this. We need that. We need people to go really deep on certain subjects. We're encouraging young people today in the 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Don't you want to be an accountant? Let's specialize right now. Pick your major. And the reality is most of us don't know. So we're specializing way too early in too many cases. And my perspective on this is that AI and future technologies are going to go really, really deep in many areas. And that means humans, in contrast, need to go broad so that we maybe get back to a broader base of studies, more of the liberal arts, more of the humanities, more of understanding each other and communicating effectively rather than the technology skills. And I'm a big champion of technology, but not to the exclusion of our ability to communicate. And so, yeah, it's that breadth of education that I think is going to be even more critically important in the information age than it was in the past.
So my final question to you then is, how do you think AI can help transform education? And how can it be used by educators and schools and universities? And what role does the government have to play in any of this?
Yeah, again, I'm going to be a huge contrarian, and some of your audience will go, "Oh, I don't like that." Here's the way I look at it, again, from a different perspective. Our current school system is broken, and we know it's broken, and we keep trying to throw Band-Aids on it. School choice, charter schools, this approach, that approach, this kind of teaching method, et cetera, et cetera. But the system was built 100 years ago or more to satisfy a need of workers for the machine age. So the Rockefellers and others stepped up and they built the current public school system, Horace Mann and others, and it was all about mass production. It was like building the Model T. One size fits all. We're going to mass produce these educated workers. And that's where standardization, that's where the bell curve comes from. And that's where the bells that separate classes came from the factory floor. All of these things in public education, especially, were built for mass production of students. One size fits all. The information age requires an entirely different approach to teaching and learning than we had 100 years ago, but yet we're still teaching with many of the same methods. We still use blackboards. Sometimes they're electronic blackboards, but they're basically blackboards. We still use books. We still use teachers standing in front of a class giving lectures. We have an opportunity to transform the way we teach and learn using technology in the same ways we transform retail. We transformed media entertainment, Blockbuster, right? Who's watching DVDs anymore? It's all about a different kind of technology delivery. And yet we haven't yet transformed education. So what are the possibilities? You asked a couple of questions. How does AI work? AI will dramatically change the role of the teacher potentially, because we can have the best algebra teacher in the world piped into every classroom. And yet the way that teacher delivers the message can be moderated based on the way the student is actually best learning it, with the current teacher serving more as a concierge, as a curator of that content and helping accelerate that child's learning curve without having to stand up there and teach algebra. So that the possibility is there. You can take that student in biology right out of the textbook and transport them into UT Southwestern's operating room and watch a live operation instead of seeing pictures of a frog dissection. You can actually see these things, and we can use technology to make that possible. So the classroom itself can change. Now, here's the problem. So that sounds great. You go, why don't we just do that? Well, the cost to build that technology on a per student basis would be tremendously high unless we leverage the power of scale. At 7-Eleven and at Blockbuster, I knew something about scale. There's not a mom and pop store in the country that could compete with 7-Eleven on technology if you amortize the cost of that technology across 80,000 stores. Well, if you amortize the cost of this technology across 10 million public school students, we can build this technology for the public school system. That's not going to happen at a school level, at a state level, or certainly a local level. It'll only happen if the government is able to, instead of eliminating the Department of Education, which is one of the political platform rungs right now. Instead, my recommendation is repurpose the Department of Education, use it to embrace technology, marshal the strength of American technology companies to come together and build, if you will, the internet platform. And I don't mean the internet, I mean build the foundation, which is what the internet is. It's the information highway. Build the information highway platform for blockchain secured transcripts and easy movement of grade, smooth interface between Google Classroom and LinkedIn Learning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically enabling technology to transform the way we teach and learn across the entire country, which will put America ahead of any other country in education if we do it right.
So who are you working with to do this?
I am trying to carry the torch. I'm out there. I'm talking to everyone I can talk with about this opportunity. That's part of the reason I launched the book. It's a call to action for corporations to step up, just like they did 100 years ago. We need the Rockefellers to come in and say, hey, this is a supply and demand issue. I need a supply of intelligent workers for the information age.
Sure.
Let's help build it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you're doing great work, really. Again, great perspective. And it was really wonderful to have you, Jim. Great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I hope you'll help me share the message, and I'll give you the opportunity to do that if your audience, if your listeners will order the book, and not just to buy it and put it on the shelf, but order it and hopefully give it away. In fact, if anyone wants to order 10 or more copies, have them send me an email. My website is jameswkeys.com, and they can find me there. I'll send them a free signed autograph version.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much. And where can people buy the book? On your website, on Amazon?
On my website, it's available, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, any of the online retailers. Sometimes it's hard to find it in bookstores, but it's all readily available online.
Great. And all the best with the book as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for helping me spread the message.
Of course. Thank you. And hope you'll join us again soon.
Looking forward to it.
And we'll see you next time on Starter TV.